Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second edition of the Communicators Assembly Point, a weekly webinar series brought to you by Adfactors PR in partnership with Reputation Today. In every edition of this series, we try and focus on one sector to see how leaders from that sector are navigating reputation in this post-COVID era and how they plan to take communications ahead. The focus for this edition is Indian startups. Before I introduce our panelists, let me remind you the hashtag for today is Comms Ahead. The session is also being live relayed on YouTube, on bit.ly/YT. So if you have friends who missed signing up, they can watch it live on YouTube as well. A warm welcome once again to all the 229 attendees who signed up. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box and do tweet using the hashtag CommsAhead. I welcome our panelists for today, Anand Bajaj from Pay Nearby, Anand Subramanian from Ola, Jigyasa Kishore from Mowglix, and Rajnish Wahi from Snapdeal. And moderating the session today is Roger Darashan from Adfactors PR. Over to you, Roger, to take this discussion ahead.
Thank you, Anubhuti. Thank you, panelists, and thank you for those who've joined us. The starting point is the starting point of the last few months, the 24th midnight on the 24th of March. So if I start with Anand Bajaj, midnight on the 24th of March, how did your communications life change?
It remained as transparent as we were always, and as frequent as it was always. What changed was the timing. From 7 a.m. we would get to speak till 12 in the night, and tirelessly, because people were not fatigued, they were at home, and everyone was on the toes wanting to do more what we could do at this time. It was while helping enhance the productivity, the role of the organization itself remained the same, where we engage and communicate with 4 lakh retailers and dispense the services to the customers on the ground. So we had additional 4 lakh mouthpieces on the ground, because government on one hand was announcing DBT disbursement, and these 4 lakh people engaged with customers to communicate and tell them what it was about and how to avail it. Amazing, it would say, a force multiplier for us.
Rajnish, Snapdeal was at the heart of this, and it's still at the heart of this.
Yes.
And we'll talk about the type of products that are running across your platform.
Yeah.
Talk us through the night of the 24th and how your priorities and the tools you use changed.
Thanks, Roger. So for us, it actually played out in 2 parts. So say around from the 10th March to 24th, 25th, it was more of internal comms, because we wanted to inform our internal stakeholders, our employees, our courier partners. We had to inform them and then reassure them that, we're going to find a way out of this together. When the lockdown happened, that's when the business got disrupted. So there we went into a very clear, fact-based, concise messaging, saying this is not available, and this is what we're going to do in the next 48 to 72 hours. So instead of very forward-looking announcements, people's lives were here and now. So our comms became here and now at that point. Thank you.
Jigyasa, your firm, amongst other things, was one of the principal suppliers of PPE supplies. How did your communications world change on that night?
So some of the things that completely changed was that the comms were no more just external focused. We had to, slice it into the various stakeholders that we have as a commerce company. We had to talk to our suppliers and, look at the force majeure of the contract and talk about it. We had to talk to our customers and say, are you still operating? If yes, what do we do for you? Or what can we realistically do for you? Because supply chain came to a screeching halt. And then we had 750 plus employees who we had to say, hey, stay calm. we don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going on, but guess what? Nobody knows what's going on, and we will figure it out together. We are in it together. So all those communications, and like, Rajnish pointed out, Carpe Diem had the real meaning for everyone, because it was 1 day at a time, 2 days at a time. And it was very much, like the government was moving lockdown, how we are going to operate as an organization also became very important. And then there was a part of communication, like you said, because we were very actively involved in the ACT grant on PPE disbursement across the world and the country. So the communication that had to go out to people that, hey, you can reach out to us, the NGOs and others, to provide the medical kits. So never before had communication been as important. It has always been very important, but as important, from the night of 24th, it really sort of went 10x, if nothing.
Anand Subramanian, I love Jigyasa's quote, "Nobody knew anything." And speaking from somebody who was involved, I think it's a perfect description of that night. Your business, Ola, with 2 million associates, I think. How did you live that night of the 24th?
Sure. I think what transpired on 24th essentially had one dry run with the Janta curfew, especially in our case, where we went out to tell people, customers primarily, not to step out and stick to the guidelines of the government. But what we really started thinking about and doing really quick was communicating to our drivers. So in terms of business continuity, in terms of getting back employees from 3 markets internationally, where many of them were deployed and were working. All of that started happening from March 10th. But March 24th was really where drivers, about 2.5 million of them, actually had no livelihood coming their way. It was zero income for them. So it was, I would say, a very, very complex mix of communication efforts and initiatives, as well as on-ground operations, and bringing together, a clarion call to really bring this community together to be able to help them. Within hours, we put forward a plan to see how we can help drivers come together, how we can help them with their livelihoods, create alternate sources of liquidity for them, and so on and so forth. So a range of initiatives, and since then have been live, have been going. And like someone else said, it's been way more than 10x. That's the level of intensity that we're talking about.
So I'll stay with you, Anand, just for this secondary question, because you have a particular consideration, this idea of essential versus non-essential, which is at the heart of lockdown policy, but is incredibly subjective. It's extremely ambiguous. And I think the dilemma that your type of organization faced was that you're not a police. You can't police regulation, but you have to be seen to adhere and support it. You didn't have the same policy as Uber in every case. So talk us through that process and how it was communicated.
Sure. I think the key word here was collaboration, right? We really wanted to ensure that we come forward, collaborate with every stakeholder out there. And very, very quickly, in a matter of hours after the lockdown was announced, various teams came together to see which part of mobility as a service that we offer is extremely essential, will not be against the guidelines that exist at this point in time, and is not detrimental to the larger interest of the community. And we zeroed in on medical trips specific to hospitals and back. We launched a new category called Ola Emergency. Quickly took that out to the larger universe, and got that communicated. All of these in a matter of hours and days in terms of execution to implementation. As of today, as the lockdown continues in many red zones, we operate in about 20 odd cities. And the fact that this came from a point of concern, that this came from a point of a shared vision, really helped define what was essential in a way, and the essential use case that we could make available. We went beyond to also support governments with our own operational strength, including vehicles on the ground. And a few weeks into the lockdown, a couple of weeks, in fact, into the lockdown, we also opened up our technology pro bono to all governments to say you can use this for emergency response on ground. Punjab uses it, to ensure social
So
distancing.
we'll cover that. That's interesting, Anand. We're going to cover that because I think that there's certainly within startups, there's lots of new and different services that have emerged that possibly wouldn't have emerged. And we'll cover that. Jigyasa, your product mix changed because you're a B2B marketplace. So how did your product mix, were there products that you simply stopped supplying because there was no demand or because the regulation requested you to stop? How was that decided?
So it was both. Interestingly, we were able to quickly adapt, and it came really from the demand from our customers who had to run FMCG plants across globe, that they wanted the regular supplies of PPE. So that sort of, got us some clarity in terms of what the essentials meant in our world. And it was we're grateful for that guideline from our customers, and we were able to switch gears. But also, Roger, we very strictly adhered to the guideline of government when they were announcing, and ours is a derived demand. So if there is something that comes to a stop, if the nobody is buying cars and autos not happening, so the MRO is not being sold, so things became unavailable on the marketplace, so that people know that the supply chain is not operating. And I think most commerce companies operated in that manner, and that helped them enforce what is essential versus non-essential to the people who are buying from us, as well as remold our, if I may use that term, and energies and resources to work towards what is actually the need of the hour, to keep world going, if I may.
Were you able to see if there were, due to flows of demand, whether you could see suspected stockpiling or misuse of essential products, or was that something that you wouldn't have been able to see?
No, definitely we were able to see there were people buying there was a bit of a craziness at the onset, but interestingly, that craziness has died down a bit. Even though the cases are on the rise, it has come to a bit of a stability. Did we do rationing around it? We did not need to do so much of rationing, because B2B scenario, people are a little bit more rational in their buying pattern compared to the B2C, where people are just like stocking, probably not in Indian context, but toilet paper, sanitizer, or whatever. So yeah, but we saw that madness, to be honest.
Anand, Bajaj, your business, it's 400,000 Kiranas you're working with now. So you're the last mile to provide people, previously unbanked people, with financial services and financial access. It was existential for them. If these people didn't receive their daily wage, there was a life at stake. So for your business, for your consideration, everything was essential.
Yes, absolutely. And to our dismay, in the first announcement of essential services, the banking agents were not part of it, and we had to struggle through the MHA, through Business Correspondent Federation of India, and make it sure that next day we are in the release list on para 3E, that the banking agents are allowed. No matter, that circular did not reach many policemen locally, and many of our guys were beaten up.
So the banking agents, the last mile agents, weren't considered authorized or weren't considered essential services initially?
Absolutely. And the early days itself, thankfully, because that is where the life starts. The government has put in money in the bank, but you give it in the hands so people can buy grocery or whatever medicine they want to buy. But what was also very typical, and from communication perspective, very interesting thing came up. Leo Burnett, our ad agency, came up with a theme which we had already built, and they launched it during this time as an essential part of communication called Zid Aage Badhne Ki. So the unstoppable, ambitious India goes along with the same theme to build up the morale of people that, yeah, let's come and take it up together. So this went well with the 4 lakh retail touch points, because we needed to boost their morale, that while half of them are sleeping at home, not wanting to come out, and the ones who came out, they needed a morale boost up. That Zid Aage Badhne Ki.
I can see that, because so many lives depended on them.
Yes, yes.
So I'm going to take a pause I'm going to ask each of you one question, and then Anubhuti, can we do a poll? And the question is each of your marketing budgets, and I'm whether or not you include public relations, but your advertising spend and your marketing budgets, as a result of the 24th, and not so much COVID, but more the confinement policies, the fact that everyone was stuck at home and the majority of businesses were forced to close. Did your budgets go up or down as a result of that? So Anand, Bajaj, we left you. Did your budgets go up or down?
So budgets, we are a startup, there wasn't any budget. And I think the work went up a lot without budget. So a lot of our engineering colleagues were brought in to do marketing as well. And the work has multiplied with zero budget.
That's not the answer I was as an agency. A wonderful answer and an honest answer. Rajnish, did your budgets go up or down following the 24th of March?
So our digital marketing, that's what we normally do. It went down to zero, literally over a phone call. I remember discussing this with the leadership team. 24th night, we called up all our digital marketing partners and said, except what's going to go tomorrow online, we're off completely. Because there was no point advertising for something that you cannot fulfill. But of course, in the last couple of days, some of it has got restored, but it's just a fraction of what it was previously.
Yeah. Jigyasa, did your ATL go up or down?
Oh, it went down. I completely echo with Rajnish's thought, because again, the digital marketing is completely akin to the ROI that it brings, and also the demand that we can fulfill what we're advertising for. When the supply chain came to a screeching halt, the marketing budgets went down.
And Anand Subramanian, tell me what was the state of your budget on the 25th of March?
Well, budgets have obviously gone down for the simple fact that there aren't rides being served in as many cities. But we do see, a significant future in terms of having to invest deeply, not in money-driven marketing, but more impact marketing of sorts. So that's begun to start. We are live in about 100 cities now. So a lot of impact marketing there, and needless to say, a lot of comms work, kind of aiding that marketing.
Well, if I do a summary, immediately 3 out of 4 of you said the budgets went down. Well, in fact, 4 of you said the budgets went down, and Anand Bajaj said the budgets went down to 0. And Anand also added an interesting caveat that he ended up doing more work with the resources he had. So I think that shows the pragmatism of a startup. So what we're going to do, Anubhuti, is have a poll. And I think the question is whether the audience believe that public relations practitioners are going to have more work or less work as a result of the coronavirus confinement. So yes, here we are. I think it's going to be circulated. And I think there's lots of supplementary questions we could ask, including will they be paid for that work and who's going to do it? But that may be for a different seminar. So we'll leave the poll up for a few seconds, but we can continue. And I want to go to Anand Bajaj, because Anand, you have worked previously with ICICI. You've worked also with Yes Bank, so you've worked with big organizations. In the confines of this discussion, do you think that the startup mentality provides you with an advantage? Does it make you more agile to cope in this type of environment? Or does it, the lack of resource and the lack of infrastructure and the lack of operations is a disadvantage?
It is an advantage. It's a mindset, actually. If capital were not scarce, entrepreneurs would not survive. Because capital is limited, you are able to do much more with the limited resources. It is more about the storytelling and orchestrating the limited resources that you have and command them to the end point at given moment. And in this particular scenario, like I was briefly speaking earlier, that we had been engineering our program called Buy Nearby, which will help you buy from the nearby Kirana store. The whole hypothesis being augmenting, accentuating the nearby retailers. And we are now launching it tonight. with the Suraksha Store program of the government. Alongside came, we look deep dive into our customer segment, and we take pride in saying that we serve the customers who serve you, the maid, mason, plumber, electrician, painter, carpenter, etc. And we saw a huge migration back into the hometowns. They have gone back. And which is where we stepped in and said, hey, if you are not remitting money from urban, that means you are jobless. So we had been engineering on jobs nearby with the hypothesis that we can help people get jobs better at the place where they are. And we have announced on 1st May, and it's about another 2-3 days of engineering left. We are reaching out to 4 lakh retail touch points and asking people for a job registry that, hey, come and register with me. I will attempt to give you a demand side feed. So with Quest Corp or with the Trust for Retailers and Retailers Associates, with the Restaurant Association, with Telecom Distribution Association, we have connected and we are going to give this supply to them.
So on the jobs nearby, we spoke before, you said that there have been 2 years in the planning. And what do you think the impact of COVID was?
So it was a most demanding need of hour, because suddenly people were left jobless, and earlier where we were running after people to set up their appointment and get their calls done for getting a job interview at blue collar worker level. Today we see that there is more a hunger both on demand supply side. Both need to work and people want employees to come and join them for work. So it's a demand fed opportunity that we are now it's a market open and much more eager and hungry right now to.
So both products, buy nearby and jobs nearby, are going to last. They're permanent products.
Yes, they are. They are.
So Anand Subramanian, there's a whole list of new services that you've launched, and you mentioned a couple of them, but I know there's Ola Emergency and others. Which of those were really the fruit of COVID, and which of them do you believe are going to last?
Sure. I think there were 3 large initiatives, if I may. One of which was the Drive the Driver Fund, which was a long-term contingency fund that we put in place for drivers across the country, which includes their families, that includes their immediate dependents that they can benefit from. The second was Ola Emergency, which is more a here and now solution for trips to and fro the hospital, which will evolve into something which we will talk about. And the third was Ola Connects, which is more of a technology solution for government organizations and public service organizations to use pro bono to solve their problems, right? And those problems included managing large numbers, large crowds, re-optimization of demand and supply, and so on and so forth, which they couldn't have built overnight. Ola Emergency will clearly transform into a service, that will keep a very, very high standard of hygiene, keep a very, very high standard of safety for customers and drivers in the new normal. Ola Connects will definitely stay for a while, even as governments and public service organizations cope with the new normal. Social distancing is not going to go anywhere. Your work from home is not going to go anywhere. So there is going to be a lot of this deployment, even as we come out of this COVID world. Which is months, if not years, and many months at that. Lastly, I think the Drive the Driver Fund is a true blue COVID initiative, born out of COVID but here to stay, run by the foundation for a very, very long time to come, which will help drivers and their families really cope with these kinds of crises in the future.
Jigyasa, we spoke about agility, and this is a panel about, by startups. Are there any initiatives, techniques, practices, or even products that have emerged from COVID within Mowglix that you believe will be permanent?
There are actually, some really big and small ones. And like I said, both for external and internal stakeholders, which I think were very positive outcome of this crisis. We've been working to launch our UK business from November. But like I said, this whole PPE and other supplies, which we had to expedite for some of our customers in the FMCG sector, made us expedite the launch, and now we are present in UK. We have an office in UK, so UK Europe market is something that we have covered out of the turn and faster than we would have. That's one big one, and that will obviously continue and proliferate. It means a lot for a B2B player from APAC going out there. From the internal, of course, a new line of category, a whole new line of category. Our whole interaction with government, that was not very, how there's always a red tape around how the procurement happens in government, and in the current situation, I must say that the way it's happening is much better, and Mowglix is being able to give them the supplies that they need.
What role did communications play in that second one, in the government engagement?
So government engagement, again, the communication channels. Now, this might not be a broad mass media kind of a communication that played role, but the right channels, like the startup panels or the people. So when we were talking also about, fiscal stimulus or all the other, lobbies that were there around startup who really wanted to help, people came together from the different portfolios, and they were talking to Invest India and other government organizations who were already active. And there we were able to help them, and it was not just out of our, quest to continue with the business, but also given the larger impact and given how it uplifts the mood of the entire organization about being useful. The sense of usefulness in this COVID situation is very big for us. So that really helped, and that would stay. And for internal stakeholders, we started something called, appreciate. So each week or each second, or I think not just week, every second day we have, some supply chain people who are at the front end sitting in warehouse, despite whatever, they are appreciated. And there is an initiative called Pathshala, which is for training people on some of the internal tools, internal best practices, cross leveraging. Because, while startups are agile, we are also running a marathon, which is a 100-meter race speed. So it's not a
sprint marathon.
Yeah, a sprint marathon. And this was a very good reset time for us as well to utilize. And we really hope to continue some of these practices for internal stakeholders as well.
Rajnish, were there communications-driven initiatives that you think are going to become permanent as a result of COVID and the confinement?
Let me speak of what we did with the government, which I think is a sort of permanent shift. It sounds unbelievable, but all the top secretaries were actually on WhatsApp group with the industry and giving real-time resolutions. So, in the early couple of days when things were really chaotic, you want a curfew pass, you want to put something to the MHA or the Disaster Management Authority, you were getting responses within half an hour. It's unbelievable. And I think once that ice is broken—
How long do they normally take?
Normally you'd call, set up a meeting. It may take a day, it may take a week, it may take much longer. But I think everybody was aligned that we are in this together. I think that's been like a real big game changer. And to the point that you can reach, let's not name anybody, but any of the top secretaries to the government, you would get a response within like an hour or so. This is sort of mind blowing.
Yeah,
that's just amazing.
Yes, and there were lists of you could call up a district magistrate and have a response. And given how busy it's not like they were sitting around for our phone calls. Given how busy they were, still the fact that they prioritized troubleshooting was amazing. On another short point, we actually launched essentials and groceries within a matter of 3 days. Normally, new category would take 6 months. But it's actually the business team made like a couple of 100 calls, signed up neighborhood grocers, the Kisan mandis, wholesalers, and got them to come on board. Normally, we do this automatic onboarding through tech tools. We actually went down, calls and all, and onboarded them, literally handheld them through and through. I think sometimes process becomes the main sort of mode of working. But in this case, the human touch came back very rapidly. And I think there's no better comms than the human touch of somebody on a phone call.
Do you think that the way you work has changed permanently, even if at some point we return to some sort of normality?
I always thought we worked super fast. And now I realize that we could work much faster. Is this sustainable? To some extent, yes. What it does, once you break a certain speed limit, you can go further.
Yeah.
So it just resets the baseline.
So we're going to just complete our questions in about 5 minutes, and then we have half an hour to take some of the questions. I would ask people to submit the questions on the Q&A, because then I can see them. I have a couple of questions for each of you. The first one, and I think that Rajnish, your last comment, I wanted to pick up on the speed and the acceleration. You know, our profession is still a creative profession. We have to try and find differentiators and innovative ways to communicate to make our brands stand out and protect our brands. This level of intensity, how do you find the mental space to reflect, to think long term or longer term, to make good decisions? Because, you know, in the immediate aftermath of the 24th, I can see that it was just transactional decision and it was existential. Now I think this is likely to continue for a number of weeks or months. So Anand Subramanian, Ola is famous for incredibly the velocity of work. But in this environment, how do you structure your time and your day, and how do you make time to think longer term?
Sure. I think the two things that quickly come to me on how does this situation with so much happening around us still get the best out of us. I think it's empathy and knowing that everyone is in the same boat, right? And we are in it together. And in fact, our campaign went on this very thought, which was stronger together across everything that we did. But really the empathy, not just for your stakeholders, but also for your co-workers, for employees. You know, everyone is stretching it out. There is no help, right? There are people at home doubling in. So many calls where we've had vessels being heard in the background. People are having dinner and taking calls at the same time. These are all stories that all of us kind of relate to, because that's the daily life that we all went into. Internally too, we did a bunch of very interesting things, right? We said 8 to 10 a.m. and 8 to 10 p.m. Would be a work for home time. We work across 4 different countries and 3 different time zones technically. So we said 8 to 10 a.m. and 8 to 10 p.m. Come what may, no calls on the calendar, right? So spend the time at home, help with the dishes, have your dinner, spend time with your kids, right? Irrespective of when you logged in, when you logged out, it just didn't make sense, to put your entire day out there. And this kind of, empathy to be able to help, be it employees or be it drivers, that really had a very, very important role to play in the creative space, right? We also operate from a point of saying, how do we help the last man on the street, the most affected, right? There was a huge debate internally on what we're doing for drivers. We did a host of initiatives for drivers on the platform, which I haven't even spoken about. But the Drive the Driver Fund was meant for every auto, cab, and taxi driver out there. And that was a very conscious call that we took to say, how can we benefit the entire community? Right?
Not just I think all our drivers.
Absolutely. It could be a driver on any platform. It could be a driver unassociated with any platform, right? And I think this kind of vastness, in a sense, really helps bring in tremendous amount of, I would say, impact and directly the kind of creativity to kind of get the most of it.
So Jigyasa, again, you're working with agencies. What's your tip? We have 200, 300 people, many of whom are either in-house or in agencies. What advice would you give them from your experience on trying to manage all the different stress of long-term, short-term execution, and then managing a household and everything at the same time?
So one thing that we have consciously, done at Mowglix is, and at every forum that we discuss within, whether it's a leadership forum or it's all hands for everyone, we've been focusing on the positive news. We've been focusing on what we're trying to do to get out of the situation, what we're trying to do to help others or help the employees to stay, and a lot of mental awareness and mental health awareness and work from home tips, or like Anand mentioned, how to how to easily slide on the continuum of work and life. When you are working from home, it can be very, very demanding. Sometimes you don't have time to go and take bath or have lunch or whatever. So how to just manage that, and focusing on also and genuinely believing that post-COVID, what would the world look like, and how would they look up to India as a center or hub of manufacturing. We're very focused on that, and that's how we've been thinking about long term. And
I think that's very important. There's not enough of that optimism, certainly in the media.
And we believe it. We genuinely believe that post what has happened, there would be enough reasons for a lot of manufacturing to come to India, and India looking bigger, better on the world map from the manufacturing commerce standpoint. So that's what we've been focusing on in terms of long term. And then, how do we use this time to make sure that technology helps us scale as an organization? And when we are getting ready for that big bang manufacturing to happen in India, how are we ready for that? So all those questions and constant thinking is keeping us on track and positive.
Rajnish, again, you have a very high velocity business and communications. What advice do you have for professionals to manage the various priorities?
So, I think everybody went transactional for a week, and that is what the situation demanded.
Yeah.
However, I would imagine most organizations have a longer term vision of what they want to communicate. For us at Snapdeal, it's about being a value focused marketplace. So after a week of firefighting and putting things in place, we went back in all our messaging to what we really want to be remembered for 5 years down the line, 2 years down the line.
So you forced yourself to think long term.
I think we always think long term, but sometimes the proportion changes. But as a strategy, we know what we are trying to say, and we'll try and put that into every message. It's also been a great time to build relationships with the media. So the client partner or the media company thing has just kind of dissipated. So everybody's trying to collectively make sense. I think some of the relationship building is I don't think you can do it in normal times. Crisis brings out the best and the worst.
There's a certain level of complicity that was never there before.
Absolutely. So I think I would echo what other people are saying. It has brought out the best in almost everybody that I can think of, because everybody suddenly went back to basic. This is what life is all about, and everything else became secondary. It's been immensely gratifying.
Yeah. And Anand Bajaj, you're the boss of your organization, so you set the tone. What advice?
I beg to differ. I'm not the boss. I'm the 17th paid salaried employee in my company. I'm not the highest paid guy.
Okay, but you're the founder and the CEO.
Yes, please.
So what example do you set? How do you help the people that you work with to manage what are very, very extreme and often stressful moments?
So first thing we resolved on the night of, actually there was another lockdown for us on the 5th March when one of our partner bank went on moratorium, and we assembled at 11 p.m. in the office, the whole steering committee team, and we resolved that whatever happens, we will not yell, we will remain calm. And that was the truest part of our, I think, lifeline all through the next lockdown. So like we see that Notebandi was the rehearsal for the Deshbandi. The lockdown, we had our own short stint on the 5th March and then on the large nationwide rollout. On the steering committee taking charge of the day-to-day activity, we carved out a 6-member team who will not work on the day-to-day activity. They continue to work on our neo-banking team. One thing important emerged, that while we were recognized as a national asset, serving in the duty at this time, we stopped calling our people whom we were serving as customer. We started saying we serve the citizen, which is true. Actually, it gives you more power, and we communicate with them that we are serving the citizen. You are the citizen. Nagrikon ko hum seva de rahe hain. Second thing, our work was our communication. We ensured that the transactions don't fail on our platform. We had augmented the server infrastructure, and we spoke in the field. People knew that when you are doing pay nearby transactions, it won't fail.
Yeah.
And since we follow the theme of automate or eliminate, any transactions which failed went back tossed automatically on the pay nearby platform. So there was a delight and comfort that people drew in this time. So I think there are a lot of these things which will continue as a good practice, like you were asking, in the long run, and we are not rolling them back. The role of media has been amazing. Our partner Adfactor has done tremendous job of reaching out to media houses after media houses, having communication calls, and especially media played an important role in the pink paper segment, which is read in Delhi, which is the decision-making policy maker for our industry. And every day we were able to make a statement and communicate with the regulator. Of course, through the Federation, Business Correspondent Federation, we continued writing them letters and which were responded to. Of course, not on WhatsApp as Rajnish was talking about, but there were formal representations and we've got formal responses with a lag, but meaningful responses.
Excellent. So we have lots of questions. So I will try and summarize a few of them. And we may not have time to go to every single panelist, but I want to try and go to every single question for the people who've taken the trouble. So Rahat Ali is asking, in the COVID-19 crisis situation, which media platforms are most impactful and why? So I think there's a big question there. You know, who are your priority media now? I think that it was a consensus that it was, you know, Economic Times, Times of India, Business Standard. What is your default go-to title now or platform now? So Rajnish, what do you think? Do you think things have changed?
I think there was this obsession with getting into print media that's dissipated as print went off. You know, it wasn't there for a few days. That digital has become the new mantra. National footprint of any kinds is what we find very effective, whether it's sort of a Your Story or a TOI, Main, Eco, in any one of them.
And Anand Subramanian, what's your default? Is print taken a second back seat, or?
Well, the good thing has been a lot of earlier what was called print media has taken a digital forefront in a big way, right? So digital still remains a big part. So does broadcast, which all of a sudden has become one of the most always on kind of medium at this point in time. And we've invested significant time, and press has been kind to be able to get our perspective across. But we continue to invest a lot in our own media. I'm saying there is 250 million users across the country who have the Ola app on their phone, right? 2.5 million driver partners who have their app, right? And a lot of the communication that we do to consumers and to our partners directly happens in a way through the own media. And I think there has also been a tremendous uptake, on the impact of social media in the last couple of months, right? A lot of the impact stories, a lot of evangelism, a lot of being able to bring people together has really happened in social for us.
So I will ask, there's a question which is a very interesting from Colonel Pankaj Sharma regarding trust and e-commerce. So is there an issue of having to rebuild trust in terms of safety and hygiene and health around e-commerce? And Jigyasa and Rajnish, both of you, do you think at some point there will be some rebuilding or some trust initiatives, and how do you plan to go about restoring that? Jigyasa, if I start with you, and then we can go to Rajnish.
So I think it's true for all e-commerce, and the way the deliveries were made, or the way, the contact happened has changed tremendously, right from how our warehouses are, how sanitized they are kept, and communications around, how sanitized the warehouses are, how we are, maintaining some social distancing in terms of our supply chain operators. or for that matter, the way the delivery is happening, which is sort of, touchless, really, if you talk about the basic hygiene of wearing gloves, and all those things will have to be done, and not just to ensure trust, but in real sense. I mean, what is the alternative? You have to keep your people safe as well. I mean, of course you have to deliver the safe package, but you also have to keep your people safe, and there is no alternative to it. So
it's going to be a criteria, absolutely. When people make Rajnish, it's going to be a criteria, right? When people, before they click their purchase button, they're going to want to know how the product's going to be delivered and whether it's safe.
Yeah, I agree. I think hygiene has become the new normal. I suspect it will not be a differentiator. People who cannot make safe deliveries directly or through their partners are going to be called out for it. On the other hand, I actually feel that trust has increased because take aside the first 10 days when e-commerce really floundered. I think it bounced back pretty sharply, whether it was essentials for some regions and then became larger. I think people realize that e-commerce has been a really good and a predictable channel to get what they want. I don't think trust has eroded. On the contrary, there have been many good stories. I cite one where there was this elderly lady in Gurgaon who wanted sanitizers and masks at her home. Her RW would not allow a delivery partner to go and deliver. So she reached out to us on our customer helpline. One of our employees went because they were allowed to go in and delivered it to her doorstep. So this is just one example, but I think e-commerce has come through for many people, and I'm sure it sets a good base going forward.
Yeah.
Roger, there is a similar challenge in banking industry where the self-service ATMs, people are skeptical about going and using it or not, versus going to a banking agent and getting sanitized, hand sanitized and get cash. So there is a shift of delivery of banking services also, like in the e-commerce. You're talking about the trust factor. I would want to put in a point here. The trust factor of the retailers has gone up tremendously. While we are talking about the challenges in the e-commerce space, the visible dispensation of product that you are able to see in the local community has come out very sharp.
Yeah, I know my Kirana owner by name now, and I've been here 4 years in this house, and I know him now.
What do you call him? What is the name?
Anand, Mr.
Thank
Anand.
you so much.
So Gia Pereira sent 2 questions. One, I believe Gia has already been answered, which was for Anand Subramanian, some initiatives, internal and external, that you took during COVID. But there's another one which is a terrible nettle to grasp, and I'm not going to cite the competition, but I think it's a legitimate question. And even if we answer it hypothetically, there's a possibility of layoffs. There's a possibility of restructuring. There's a possibility in the future of very public numbers of people being made unemployed. I'm not necessarily referring to individual companies, your companies, but in general, what advice would you give communicators? Because it is a consideration. How would you go about planning? What should you think about? And what do you think are some good practices? And I'll start with you, Anand. And I'm not referring to your firm, I'm referring to your professional experience. What do you think is a good approaches that people on this call can consider?
Sure. I would say lead by example should be step one, and that should mean every other effort being taken before resorting to a step which will affect lives and livelihoods. And that could mean salary cuts. That could mean people taking year-long cuts. It could mean cost cutting at various levels, right? And I think that's more action than communication, and communication of that action, I think, brings in a tremendous amount of credibility and trust. The second part, of course, is also around dealing with it with absolute compassion and I repeat that, but with a lot of empathy, because we're talking about a situation which probably is bottomless in a sense, at least at this point from where we see it, right? Businesses are going to be affected. people will be affected. It is very, very important that the communication and the action both are empathetic and happen with a lot of compassion. And that I think are two, I would say, cornerstones for any communication happening at this point in time.
Rajnish, again, this is a shadow that is cast on everyone. In your professional communications experience, what do you think? I mean, Anand was clear: empathy and leading by example to make those messages credible. What other advice? What should people consider?
I completely echo what Anand said. I think those two are sort of completely, they are the first 1 or 2 steps. In addition, I think making sure that the employees impacted do not see it as personal. I know it's easy to spin it externally, but in a chat between 2 individuals, it comes down to how I take it. So it's important that they don't see it as a personal condemnation. They see it as something that's situational, which impacts other people. I think putting it out externally, if somebody were to externalize a message of laying off a certain amount of their workforce, saying that it's with great sadness, saying that the great individuals who we find will sort of get wonderful opportunities elsewhere, we're happy to welcome them back. For Snapdeal, when we laid off a couple of years back, we actually told them that when we have vacancies, you will be the first ones to be called back. And I'm proud to say that about 100 people came back in the last 2 years, and they missed being in Snapdeal. So I think meaning what you say and saying what you mean are absolutely essential.
Yeah. Jigyasa, you have an interesting perspective because you're a business leader as well. Your responsibility is not just communications.
Yeah.
Using also your business hat, what are some considerations about how to communicate what might be some necessary business news?
Again, it reminds me of a conversation that Ratan Tata was having with a lot of other founders, where he asked, how does it feel?
He's one of your investors.
Yeah, he is one of our investors. And how does it feel? So, for an entrepreneur or a business leader, it's really painful when you have to lay off people. And unfortunately, in unprecedented times like these, when the top line is getting brutally impacted, it might become reality, if not sooner than later, for most organizations in some shape or form. About internal communication, I would echo with both, Rajnish and Anand about how you are, letting people know about what's going on. And that level of transparency and preparedness in the internal communication really helps in, letting people know that it is not about them or them alone. It is also about the macro situation, which is not in control of anyone. And, like he once said, and I was just, quoting Ratan Tata in one of his interactions, he said, when an architecture is building a building, it's with great passion and love that he or she creates that building. Now, if you have to take one portion down because the pillars are weak or something's gone wrong, it's very painful. So that pain or vulnerability of a leader, it's not bad to show it at all. I mean, it should come across, because these are the times where you have to, and I don't know, and there is no one right way of communicating it. There could never be, it's almost like, how do you condone somebody's death? It's also painful.
Anand, Bajaj, a particular point on this question for the audience who are communicators. Often these are business decisions and it's left to the communicators to communicate them. I'm certain that's not the case with your organization. But my question to you is, how should communicators try and be involved in that process? How can they engage the leadership to be part of that process, which can then help them communicate it?
So I think it starts with transparency and involvement. There is no senior leadership meeting where we do not have our COPCOM team members, and likewise the engineering or product guys. So the empathy, like what Anand Subramanian said, starts with understanding not only customer, but your organization itself. And when it comes to communicate internally, it is not the COPCOM head who stands up and talks. It is me who has to stand and face people. And like Jigyasa said, there is no harm in letting the guards down and telling that you are all vulnerable. but it helps when you do context setting. People understand that what is happening globally, trillions lost, jobs lost, and that it is a fact that reboot, reskill, repurpose a lot of things is a way of life now. And which is where, when I said in the beginning, we have re-engineered and moved our engineers to do the marketing work as well. And LinkedIn has come out as a fantastic open platform for communicating, marketing. We have got enough engagements from that platform. But to the specific point that it will be a siloed organization if you are not transparent and engaging the Corpcom teams into most of your decision making, because even advice coming from them to what you have to speak to people is meaningful. What you have to speak to the regulator is meaningful, and what they speak to the media is from the conviction of the organization which gets carried through.
Anubhuti, I think we have a question from our sponsor, Madan Bahal. Do you want to, can we introduce him?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question for Anand and Rajnish, both. Impacted your founders, because it's a transformational moment for everybody. And how has your relationship with the founders been impacted in this time?
So Anand Subramanian, I think it is the recipient of the first question.
Sure. Being part of this organization for well over 7 years, I think this time has really brought in a tremendous amount of very deep understanding of each other's personal lives as well as personalities in a very interesting dimension, right? I really get to see, for example, what it takes for an entrepreneur to be who he or she is and why he or she is at a crisis like this, right? Also, when I was talking about leading by example, for instance, right? Even before we carved out the Drive the Driver fund, right? The first contribution was essentially, Bhavish and his whole year's salary towards the fund, right? And I think that followed with a lot of the leadership coming forward to contributing to the fund in a big way. But I think leading by example really stands out, for every entrepreneur who's been part of this crisis. And that, I think, is a great amount of inspiration, not just for communication professionals, but an opportunity for, every team member to really, resonate with and reckon with, and be very more integrated to the vision.
Okay, let me take a shot at that. I know Kunal and Rohit very well, been with them for almost 5 years. And if I knew them any better, I'll probably stay in their homes or vice versa. So, but honestly, I think some of the crisis moment really brings you closer. At Snapdeal, we've been through our rough and tumble, whether it's sort of a certain pivot or demonetization, etc., etc. So this is not the first time we have been thrown into the deep end of the pool. And I think there is this inherent trust that I have mutually with all of them. It's sort of, they know what I can do best, and I know when to sort of lean on them. And I think these situations just make that distinction more stark. It brings in more confidence, and I think it also prepares you for, you can do your work far more independently because you have a greater perspective on that. So that's my short answer on that.
Roger, can I ask a follow-up question to
Of course you can.
Anand Bajaj and Jigyasa?
Of course you can.
One of your critical stakeholder is the private equity who funds most of these businesses. Has your relationship with private equity turned for the better or worse in this time?
I can take this. We are privileged to have not raised beyond our seed round. And the investor, Roha Group, has been very nice and understanding partner. We, on the other hand, because of the work dimensions that have opened up, we have been approached by many investment partners. So it's a great delight that the work has shown up and there is more open invitations from people to come and partner in this platform right now. There has been a fantastic understanding with our current investors. There is free hand on execution because we understand what we do. And I would say it is a blessing for any startup to have investors who are hands-free and trust mode operating partners.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jigyasa, do you want to share your response?
Yeah. So, Madan, we are largely venture funded, but ventures like Axel, Tiger Global, and Sequoia and others. I think it's been really good because they have been very forthcoming in supporting our experiment meetings and communications to understand that we are in this together and how do we bridge over it rather than fret about just cost cutting or talk negative. Yeah. I think it has been good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We're trying to get through the questions for those who took the trouble. Anubhuti, do we have 5 minutes? Can we just try and close the questions?
Yes, Roger, we can take about 5 minutes more if that's okay with the panelists. Okay, so I'll try and summarize because some of the questions have been answered already, and some of them I can summarize. So there was 2 interesting ones, one from Arun Mittal and one again from Rahat Ali. So thank you, and I'll summarize them. One is what can PR firms do more than generate coverage? Is there something else or something additional that you're looking for? And within that question, to summarize the other one, how is the relationship, how can the relationship between startups and PR firms change as a result of COVID? So if I start with Anand Subramanian, your expectations from PR firms, how have they evolved?
No, I think counsel and strategic insight are 2 things which will trump any other at this point, right? Followed by I would say how to get more out of what you do, right? And not from a perspective of coverage, but really from a perspective of impact. I think these are very, very essential. In a time like this, which is the first for every one of us, right? There is very little precedence, which is where I think an agency brings in the perspective of being able to, share best practices in other industries, what's happening, what can be learned from there, what can be implemented fast, right? Without breaking, right? I think these are very interesting insights that an agency partner can really, come to an agile startup with at this point.
So agencies need to be as agile as their clients.
Absolutely.
Rajnish, are we still defined by coverage, or are you expecting something else from us?
We never expected coverage as the main criteria, and I sort of stand steady with that. I think the real value add is the strategy. Like, I know my business better than Adfactors. Adfactors knows media better than me. So when we come together in a partnership, that's what really adds value. And I completely echo what Anand said. I was on a session with Mr. Bell a few days ago, and I think he spoke from his decades of experience. And honestly, that's worth its weight in gold, because in normal times, we may not sit together as a smaller forum or a larger forum to actually share decades worth of insights packed into action points. I think those are absolutely sort of brilliant gems in a sort of difficult situation.
Absolutely. Jigyasa, what are your expectations and how have they changed post-COVID?
So, like I had mentioned, while even dealing with government or while, talking about what is the piece of news that we should disseminate or not, I think it is post-COVID. I think I've called Samir more than I used to call him, because, and it is more for his advice, because I have the limited purview of what I'm reading, but he is living that life with multiple accounts and he knows what people, so he's really my source to crowdsourcing of information on what to do, what not to do. And, like Anand said, we don't have precedence of how to behave. The reputation is very fragile at this point in time, where you have to be very sure of what you can let out in media or not. things are open to interpretation. There are different kinds of frustrations floating around. So it's been very invaluable to reach out to Samir and get his ideas.
And Anand Bajaj, again, we've spoken about agility. How can PR firms be as agile as the type of startup we have today?
So I would not deny the fact that more coverage is the ask. I would not sugarcoat it. It helps because our segment wants to read paper, and both the regulator and the mass media believes what is printed is right. A WhatsApp post won't serve. So the work done during this time on reaching out more publications was amazing. And I believe Rahul, Sonia, and Anil were almost like a part of our Corpcom team. So they were not treated any different. There are daily hurdles and talks that we do. The strategies on the next month to next quarter, what we are positioning when we are rolling out, when do we go out to communicate are handy and helpful. I'm a chartered accountant. Half my team is engineer. And of course, Jayatri leads the Corpcom and the marketing practice as the CMO. But the help from the strategic advisor from Adfactor, what comes is really helpful. So I don't think they need to change any more, because I have seen the best of them in these times. I don't say they should change.
I can see. And I can see it's even more important in a startup environment.
It is indeed.
So we're going to close. So Anubhuti, if you can prepare, are you able to prepare the results of our poll?
Yes,
and
we can show them right
as you
away.
prepare that, I'm going to ask each of the panelists, while I thank them, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to answer. Well, there's going to be lots of work. So the question, it's good for our industry. 97% believe there'll be more work. And so the key, I guess, is that we need to go and grab it. But I would close thanking each of the panelists. And I want to ask them one question, and we need just a small, short answer. For the COVID effect in public relations, which is one change that they think will be permanent in the way that they do public relations, in the way that they communicate. So if I start with Anand Subramanian, what is one thing that you believe will be permanent as a result of COVID in the way that you communicate?
I think being more impact driven is really going to be the one big change. I think people really need to see how something matters to them in a way that is extremely relatable. So I think that's going to be one huge change. It's not going to be information anymore. It's going to be, how does it affect you?
Anand Bajaj, what is one thing that you think will change permanently as a result of COVID in the way that you communicate?
The instant response expectation. No more will people have the luxury of a day to respond back. And the way they have proven that they can respond back in a minute or two, the think on the feet and on the fly responses, this expectation is not going to change ever now. We know you guys can do it.
Thank you. Jigyasa, is there one aspect of communications that you think will change permanently as a result of COVID?
Yeah, I think the way you communicate about any piece of information and how it impacts the macro, environment is going to become very, very important. You cannot just talk about your industry or yourself. You will have to talk about how COVID is impacting everyone, and so it's going, whether you want it or not, it is going to be somewhere related to COVID for a very, very long time.
Yeah, it's about more than you, though. It's about the industry.
It's about industry. It's about the country. It's going to be like that.
And Rajnish, I'm hoping that you're going to tell me that the bureaucracy will speed up permanently. Is that going to be a permanent change?
They've actually been getting better over the last many years, and I think now they're almost caught up to private sector speed, in some cases overtaken. But and I say it with a great appreciation, because it's easy for us to criticize, from the outside, but the government has multiple inputs coming in. The stakes that they deal with are much larger, and some of the bureaucrats are so outstanding that just sort of makes me feel so good about that. But on a shorter point, I think more precise communication, more empathy, faster speed are going to be defining features of comms going forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your contributions that were all sincere and considered. There's so much value in your experience. Thank you very much for being so generous. Anubhuti, can I hand to you to close?
Yes, absolutely. A big thank you once again to all our panelists. I think this was a fabulous session. Thank you, Anand Bajaj. Thank you, Jigyasa, Kishore, Anand Subramanian, Rajnish, Wahi. Thank you for your time today and for sharing these insights with us. Thank you, Roger, for giving this panel such an impactful direction today. Thank you to all our attendees. I'm sure you're all going away with some great key learnings. If you wish to revisit this session, it is available on bit.ly/YT, and it will also be available on the Reputation Today YouTube channel. We will see you next week with another insightful session focused on the healthcare sector. Do follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at RepTodayMag for updates on the same and for the links to sign up. So thank you once again, everyone, and we'll see you next week here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anubhuti.
Thanks, Raj.